The cowboy gave shelter to a veiled beggar woman. When he found out who she was, he was frozen. A gentle wind swept across the plains, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and the faint aroma of wildflowers. The cowboy rode steadily on his horse, a strong brown stallion that had been his companion for many years. He was a tall man, with a rugged face tanned by the sun and hands hardened from years of work under the open sky. His eyes, sharp and cautious, scanned the horizon as he guided his horse along the winding trail. It had been a long day. The cowboy had left early in the morning to check on the fences and water troughs scattered across his land. Along the way, he had seen nothing but the endless expanse of plains, the occasional coyote darting across the road, and a few scattered tumbleweeds rolling with the wind. Normally, he preferred the quiet, the solitude that allowed him to think and enjoy the simple life he had chosen. But today, something felt different. He had a strange feeling in his chest, a sensation that made him slow his pace and pay closer attention to the world around him. As he rode over a small rise, he saw something unusual in the distance. At first, he thought it was a shadow or a trick of the light, but as he got closer, he realized it was a figure, a woman, walking slowly along the dusty road. She was draped in a long, dark cloak, and her face was hidden beneath a veil. She carried a small bundle in her arms, and her steps seemed unsteady, as if she were exhausted from a long journey. The cowboy's instincts immediately told him to be cautious. Travelers on the plains could be dangerous, and it was not uncommon to hear stories of bandits or thieves taking advantage of the lonely roads. Yet, something about the woman made him hesitate. There was a fragility in her movements, a quiet desperation that tugged at the corner of his heart. He had always been a man who respected strength and bravery, but he also had a soft side he rarely showed. And now, he felt it stirring. He guided his horse closer, slowing to a walk so as not to startle her. "Ma'am," he called gently, his voice carrying across the open plains. "You look like you could use some help. Can I offer you a ride or some shelter for the night?" The woman paused, her head tilting slightly as if listening to the wind. She said nothing at first. The cowboy could see the subtle tension in her body, the way her hands tightened around the bundle she carried. Finally, she spoke in a soft, almost hesitant voice. I have nowhere to go," she said. "If you would let me rest for a while, I would be grateful." The cowboy felt a flicker of relief. "You're welcome to come with me. It's not much, but I have a cabin a few miles from here. You'll be safe there." He waited for her to respond, unsure if she would trust him. After a moment, she nodded, and together they began the short journey to his cabin. The ride was quiet. The cowboy kept a careful eye on the horizon, watching for any signs of trouble, while the woman sat silently on the horse behind him, clutching her bundle tightly. Occasionally, she would glance around, as if taking in the vast emptiness of the plains with a mixture of fear and awe. The cowboy noticed the way she held herself, the careful grace in her movements, and he wondered about her story. Who was she, and why was she traveling alone? When they arrived at the cabin, the cowboy dismounted and helped her down. The cabin was small but sturdy, built of weathered wood and surrounded by a simple fence. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, and the scent of burning wood mingled with the fresh evening air. The cowboy opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Inside, the cabin was humble but cozy. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting a warm glow across the room. The furniture was simple, a wooden table, a few chairs, and a bed tucked into the corner. Shelves lined the walls, holding jars of preserves, tools, and a few books that the cowboy had collected over the years. It was not a grand home, but it was clean and welcoming, a safe haven in the middle of the vast plains. "Sit down," the cowboy said, motioning to a chair near the fire. "I'll get you something to eat. You must be hungry after traveling all day." The woman hesitated for a moment before lowering herself into the chair. She placed her bundle carefully beside her, still keeping her hands on it as if it were the only thing she could truly hold onto. The cowboy moved to the kitchen area, rummaging through his supplies. He found some bread, cheese, and a bit of dried meat, simple food but enough to provide warmth and comfort. He set a plate before her and poured a cup of water. "Here," he said, placing the food gently in front of her. "Eat while it's hot. You've had a long day." The woman looked at the plate, then at him, and gave a small, polite nod. She picked up a piece of bread and took a tentative bite. The cowboy watched her carefully, noting the careful way she ate, the way she savored each bite as if it were more than just food. It was security, a small measure of comfort in a world that had offered her little. They did not speak much. The cowboy respected her silence, sensing that she needed time to feel safe. He went about his own tasks, tending to the fire, cleaning a few dishes, and making sure everything was in order. Occasionally, he glanced at her, curiosity bubbling beneath his calm exterior. There was something unusual about her, something that did not match the image of a wandering beggar. He could not put his finger on it, but he felt that she carried a story, one that was hidden behind the veil she wore so carefully. As the night grew darker, the wind outside picked up, rattling the windows and sending small gusts of cold air into the cabin. The woman wrapped herself tightly in her cloak, and the cowboy offered her a blanket. "You can rest," he said gently. "There's a bed over there. I'll sleep in the chair by the fire. You need warmth and you need rest." She hesitated again but finally accepted, unwrapping her cloak and settling onto the bed. The cowboy lit a small lantern, casting a soft light across the room, and then sat nearby, keeping watch. Even though he had offered her shelter out of kindness, he felt a sense of responsibility now. There was something fragile and precious about her presence, and he could not shake the feeling that her journey had been dangerous. Hours passed quietly. The crackle of the fire was the only sound, mingling with the occasional whistle of the wind outside. The cowboy found himself thinking about the woman, wondering who she was and what had brought her to this lonely place. He had met many travelers in his time, but there was something different about her, an elegance and quiet dignity that seemed at odds with her current circumstances. Finally, as the fire burned low and the night deepened, the cowboy allowed himself to relax. He leaned back in his chair, keeping one eye on the woman, who had finally closed her eyes and seemed to be sleeping. There was a sense of peace in the cabin now, a fragile calm that contrasted with the harsh world outside. And as he watched over her, the cowboy felt a strange mix of emotions, curiosity, concern, and a growing sense of connection to this mysterious stranger who had appeared on his path that evening. He did not know her name. He did not know her story. But he knew one thing for certain. He had offered her shelter, and in doing so, he had opened the door to something that could change both of their lives forever. And as the wind whispered through the plains outside, the cowboy settled into his chair, ready to face whatever the next day might bring, unaware that this encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would reveal secrets, test courage, and forever alter the course of their lives. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, turning the sky into soft shades of pink and gold. The plains outside the cabin were quiet and still, only the occasional rustle of leaves or a distant bird breaking the silence. Inside, the cowboy stirred in his chair, having spent the night keeping watch over the mysterious woman. She lay under the blanket on the small bed, her veiled face turned slightly toward the window. He could see her breathing even and calm now, a stark contrast to the tired and desperate figure he had found on the road. The cowboy rose quietly, careful not to wake her, and stoked the fire to life. The warmth from the flames spread through the room, casting gentle shadows on the wooden walls. He moved to the small kitchen area, placing a pot of water on the stove and setting a kettle to boil. He wanted to make tea for both of them, something simple and comforting to start the day. The smell of the tea soon filled the cabin, mingling with the faint scent of the wooden floor and the fire. After a few moments, the woman stirred and opened her eyes. She looked at him briefly, then quickly lowered her gaze, her veil still hiding most of her face. "Good morning," she said softly. Her voice was quiet but steady, polite in a way that suggested refinement. "Good morning," the cowboy replied, offering a warm smile. "I made some tea. It will warm you up after the cold night." He placed a cup on the small table near her bed. "You can sit up if you like." She nodded and carefully sat up, folding the blanket neatly around her shoulders. Her movements were deliberate, graceful, and yet cautious. The cowboy couldn't help but notice the elegance in the way she carried herself, even in the simplest actions. It made him wonder about her past, about what kind of life someone with such poise could have had before she ended up walking alone on the dusty plains. They ate breakfast quietly. The cowboy had prepared a few slices of bread and some cheese, simple food, but enough to give them both energy for the day ahead. The woman ate slowly, taking small bites, as if savoring the taste and the security of having a warm meal in a safe place. The cowboy watched her with a mix of curiosity and concern. Every now and then he tried to make small conversation, testing the waters to see if she would open up. "Where were you headed?" he asked casually, keeping his tone neutral. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I'm curious." The woman paused, her hands tightening slightly around her cup. She looked down at it for a moment before answering. I am on a journey," she said softly. "It has been a long road and I am not certain where it will end." The cowboy nodded, understanding more than she probably realized. He had spent many years on his own journey across the plains, dealing with the unpredictability of life, the loneliness, and the constant need to survive. He did not press further, respecting her privacy, though his curiosity grew. There was something about her voice, the careful way she spoke, that suggested a life very different from the one she appeared to live now. After breakfast, the cowboy offered to show her around the cabin and the surrounding land. "You might want to stretch your legs," he said. "The fresh air will help you feel better." She hesitated for a moment, then agreed, standing slowly. The cowboy could see the effort it took her to move, the slight stiffness in her limbs from traveling long distances on foot. He helped her step outside, and the sunlight warmed them both immediately. The plains stretched endlessly before them, golden grasses swaying gently in the morning breeze. Birds flitted from bush to bush, and in the distance, the silhouette of mountains could be seen against the rising sun. The cowboy led her to the edge of a small creek nearby, the water sparkling as it trickled over smooth stones. "It's peaceful here," he said. "Not much happens, but it's a good place to think, to rest." The woman knelt beside the creek, her hands trailing lightly in the cool water. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought, as if the beauty and simplicity of the place reminded her of something long forgotten. The cowboy watched silently, giving her space, yet feeling a strange connection forming between them. There was trust in her actions now, a subtle shift from the cautious fear he had first seen. As the morning passed, the woman began to ask small questions about the cowboy's life. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, her curiosity gentle. "Yes," he replied. "Mostly. The plains are quiet and it suits me. I like the freedom, though it can be lonely at times." She nodded thoughtfully, as if considering his words. "It must take courage to live so far from others," she said softly, "to depend only on yourself." The cowboy smiled faintly. "Courage maybe, or maybe just necessity. Out here, you learn to take care of yourself because no one else will." She remained quiet for a moment, then asked something that surprised him. "Have you ever met someone who changed your perspective on life? Someone who made you see the world differently?" The question caught him off guard. He leaned against a fence post, thinking carefully before answering. "Sometimes," he said slowly. "Not often, though. Life out here teaches you to be careful with your heart, but when it does happen, it's unforgettable." The woman did not respond immediately, but her eyes seemed to glimmer with a mix of curiosity and understanding. The cowboy noticed the subtle intelligence behind her gaze, the way she seemed to observe everything with quiet attentiveness. He realized that despite her outward appearance as a weary traveler, she was far more knowledgeable and refined than anyone he had expected to meet on the road. Later, as the day grew warmer, the cowboy suggested she rest again while he tended to some chores around the cabin. He repaired a section of the fence that had been damaged by the wind and carried water from the creek to the cabin. He glanced occasionally at the woman, who had settled on a small blanket in the shade, reading a worn book she had taken from her bundle. The sight surprised him. She could read, and with such focus and ease. The realization deepened his curiosity about her true identity. By afternoon, the wind had calmed, and the sun shone brightly overhead. The cowboy returned to the cabin and found the woman quietly sketching in a notebook, the veil still partially concealing her face. He noticed the delicate strokes of her hand, the care with which she depicted the surrounding landscape. It was unusual to see someone so skilled and so composed, especially after the hardships she must have endured to reach this place. "Those are beautiful," he said, genuinely impressed. "You have quite the talent." She looked up briefly, a hint of a smile visible beneath the veil. "Thank you," she said softly. "It helps me remember things, places I've seen and people I've met. It keeps me grounded." The cowboy nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and curiosity. The day passed slowly, filled with small moments of shared silence, quiet observation, and subtle conversation. He found himself talking more than usual, sharing stories of his life on the plains, of the animals he had cared for, and the challenges he had faced alone. The woman listened attentively, occasionally asking thoughtful questions, her responses revealing intelligence, wit, and a deep understanding of human nature. As evening approached, the sky turned to shades of orange and purple once again. The cowboy prepared a modest dinner, and they ate together near the fire. The woman spoke very little, but her polite manners, gentle questions, and quiet curiosity continued to leave an impression on him. He realized that this was no ordinary traveler. She carried herself with a dignity and grace that suggested a life very different from the one she now appeared to live. When the meal was finished, the cowboy offered her another blanket for the night. She accepted, settling into the bed with care. He placed the blanket over her shoulders and watched her for a moment, sensing that there was much more to her story than she was willing to reveal. Yet, he respected her silence. He knew that trust could not be rushed, and that sometimes simply offering kindness and safety was the first step toward understanding someone truly. As the night deepened, the cowboy sat near the fire once more, reflecting on the day. The woman's presence had changed something within him. He had spent so long alone, relying on himself and expecting little from others. Yet now, he felt a strange sense of connection, a curiosity that was difficult to ignore. He did not know who she really was or why she was traveling in such a disguise, but he knew that meeting her had stirred something in his heart, a sense of wonder, concern, and admiration that he had not felt in years. And as the wind whispered softly outside the cabin, the cowboy leaned back in his chair, ready to face another day with the mysterious woman under his roof. He did not know what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. The days ahead would bring revelations, challenges, and a bond that neither of them could have anticipated, and their journey together was only just beginning. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the plains, casting a warm, golden glow across the cabin and the surrounding fields. The cowboy was already awake, moving quietly around the small home to avoid disturbing the mysterious woman. She had stayed up later than usual the night before, reading and occasionally sketching in her notebook by the firelight. From the corner of his eye, he could see her now, still partially veiled, sitting near the window as sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating her delicate features just enough to show her calm, composed demeanor. The cowboy busied himself with chores, checking the fence and filling the water troughs for the animals. Even as he worked, he could feel the woman's presence, like a quiet, gentle shadow in the cabin, drawing his attention without speaking. He had already begun to notice small details about her that seemed unusual for someone traveling as a beggar. She moved with a careful elegance, spoke with a refined accent, and possessed a quiet intelligence that was difficult to ignore. Every gesture, every glance seemed measured yet natural, as if she were trained in manners and grace that were far removed from the life of a wandering traveler. Finally, curiosity overcame his usual caution. He approached her gently, leaning against the doorway. "You seem different from anyone I've met on these plains," he said carefully, trying to sound casual. "You carry yourself with a sort of dignity, even though you've been traveling for so long. I can't help but wonder how you came to be out here, all alone." The woman looked up at him, her eyes partially visible beneath the veil. For a moment she said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy yet not uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "Sometimes people are forced to travel far from where they belong," she said. "And sometimes it is a choice, though not always an easy one. One learns to survive, to adapt, and to hide one's true self when necessary." The cowboy listened intently, intrigued by her words. There was something carefully hidden behind them, a story she was not ready to tell yet. He respected her silence, but his curiosity only grew. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" he asked, keeping his voice gentle. "I can see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak. There's more to you than meets the eye." Her hands rested in her lap, fingers lightly touching the bundle she carried. "Yes," she said quietly, "more than you can imagine. But some things are meant to remain hidden until the right time." The cowboy nodded slowly, understanding more than she probably realized. He had spent years on the plains, observing people, reading their actions and learning to interpret even the smallest details. He had met many travelers, some kind and some cruel, but this woman was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. There was an intelligence, a strength, and a subtle elegance in her that suggested she came from a very different world than the one she now traveled through. Over the next few hours, small hints of her true identity began to appear, though she still carefully concealed them. When she moved to fetch water from a nearby basin, she handled the jug with surprising ease and grace, balancing it perfectly without spilling a drop. When she spoke, she used words that were precise and thoughtful, reflecting a level of education that was rare in the harsh lands of the plains. And when she smiled, just a small curve of her lips, there was a warmth and gentleness that seemed almost out of place in her current situation. The cowboy found himself watching her more closely, trying to understand her story without pushing too hard. He noticed the way she paused to observe the animals outside, the way she traced her fingers along the wooden beams of the cabin, and the care she took in arranging her small belongings. It was clear to him now that this woman was not merely a traveler in need. She was someone of refinement, someone accustomed to comfort and attention, yet forced to hide behind a veil and a simple bundle to survive. Later in the day, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the cowboy suggested they take a walk beyond the cabin. "It's a fine day," he said. "The plains are calm, and it's better to get some fresh air than stay cooped up inside." She hesitated for a moment but eventually agreed, carefully stepping outside and following him. The open land stretched endlessly, golden grasses swaying in the warm breeze. Birds sang in the distance, and the mountains loomed far away, majestic and silent. The cowboy pointed out the creek where he fetched water and the small grove of trees that offered shade during the hottest part of the day. The woman listened and observed quietly, occasionally asking gentle questions, her curiosity subtle but unmistakable. "You seem very familiar with this land," she said. "You know every corner, every path. Do you ever tire of it?" "I do sometimes," the cowboy admitted. but this land has been my home for many years. You learn its rhythms, its dangers, its quiet beauty. It teaches you to survive, to respect life, and sometimes to find peace in solitude." She nodded thoughtfully, her eyes lingering on the horizon. "I can see that. There is a kind of calm here, a sense of order amidst the vast emptiness. I think I would like to feel that calm someday." Her words struck him. There was a vulnerability behind them, a longing for something beyond mere survival. He wondered what kind of life she had left behind, what had brought her to these lonely plains in search of shelter and safety. Her refined speech, her knowledge of etiquette, and the grace in her every movement suggested a past far removed from the hardships of the road. Yet she carried herself with humility, never boasting, never revealing the full story. As they walked, the cowboy noticed small, unusual details. She handled a fallen branch with care, examining it as if she understood the structure of nature more deeply than most. She noticed the patterns of the clouds and the subtle changes in the wind, commenting on them quietly but accurately. Even the way she approached the animals, speaking softly and moving slowly, suggested she had been trained to behave in a controlled and respectful manner around living creatures. By the time they returned to the cabin, the cowboy's curiosity had grown into fascination. He had spent hours observing her, and each moment revealed something new, something unexpected. It was clear to him now that this woman was no ordinary traveler. She was intelligent, educated, and refined, with manners and knowledge far beyond what he had seen in the ordinary world. Yet despite all this, she had chosen, or been forced, to hide behind a veil and a modest appearance, walking alone through the harsh plains with nothing but a small bundle to protect her. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, the cowboy prepared a simple meal. They ate together quietly, the fire crackling and casting gentle shadows around the cabin. The woman spoke sparingly, yet each word carried thought and insight. She asked about his life, his experiences, and the challenges of living alone in such a vast and unforgiving landscape. In return, the cowboy shared stories of his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned from years of solitude. The more they spoke, the more the cowboy realized how remarkable she truly was. Her observations were sharp, her questions thoughtful, and her demeanor calm and composed. There was an intelligence and depth in her that suggested she had experienced much more than she revealed. And though she spoke of hardship, she did so with restraint, never complaining, never seeking pity. As night fell, the cowboy prepared her bed with care, placing a warm blanket over her shoulders. She accepted it with a gentle nod, her veil still hiding her face but not her dignity. He sat nearby, reflecting on the day, on the small hints he had gathered about her life, and on the growing sense of curiosity and admiration he felt for this mysterious woman. He did not know her true identity yet, but he sensed that the revelation, when it came, would be extraordinary. And he understood something else as well. Meeting her had already changed him. Her presence had stirred emotions he had long kept buried, curiosity, respect, and an unspoken bond that was forming slowly but surely. And as the wind whispered softly through the plains, the cowboy sat near the fire, keeping a silent watch. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. This woman, veiled and quiet as she might be, had already left an indelible mark on his life, and the story of their meeting was far from over. The next morning, the cowboy awoke before the sun had fully risen. The plains were still draped in soft shades of pink and gray, and a quiet calm hung over the land. He moved around the cabin quietly, preparing breakfast, knowing that the woman had already begun to stir. True to his observation, she appeared at the window, her veil still in place, watching the morning light spill across the grass. Something about her posture this morning was different, more relaxed, less tense than when he had first met her. It was as if the land, the quiet, and the safety of the cabin had begun to soothe her. The cowboy set the table with a few slices of bread, fresh water, and cheese. When he offered it to her, she accepted with a polite nod. As she ate, she looked out at the plains, her hands resting on her cup, and the cowboy noticed a strange intensity in her gaze. It was not fear or worry, but careful observation, as if she were taking in every detail of the cabin, the surrounding land, and even him. He had learned by now that this woman was no ordinary traveler. Her knowledge, her grace, and her refined mannerisms suggested a life that had been far removed from the hardships she now appeared to endure. Yet she spoke little about her past, revealing only fragments in careful, measured words. The cowboy respected her privacy but could not help the curiosity burning inside him. After breakfast, they stepped outside, and the cowboy suggested they walk to the nearby grove of trees. "It's a fine day," he said, trying to make casual conversation. "The wind is calm and the shade will be pleasant." She agreed, moving with a quiet elegance that caught his attention yet again. As they walked, the cowboy observed her carefully, noticing subtle clues that hinted at a life of comfort and sophistication. The way she adjusted her veil, the careful control in her steps, and the grace with which she handled the natural obstacles of the land were all inconsistent with someone who had lived a life of hardship for long periods. They reached the grove, where the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patches of warmth and shadow on the ground. The woman knelt near a small stream, dipping her hands in the water to wash them. As she did, a piece of jewelry slipped from her cloak and fell into the water, catching the sunlight. The cowboy bent down to retrieve it, his eyes widening as he saw what it was, a delicate gold bracelet, engraved with intricate patterns and tiny gemstones. He held it up carefully, examining it. This is beautiful," he said, astonished. "Where did you get this?" The woman froze, her hands clutching the edge of the stream. For a moment she said nothing, and the cowboy noticed a flicker of fear in her eyes. Then slowly she lifted her veil. What he saw left him frozen. Beneath the veil was not the tired, weary face of a beggar woman, but the refined, radiant face of someone accustomed to wealth and privilege. Her skin was smooth and unmarked, her eyes bright and clear, and her features elegant and noble. The cowboy could hardly believe his eyes. The woman before him was not just a traveler in need. She was someone of high status, perhaps even a member of a wealthy or noble family. The realization struck him with an almost physical force. All the hints he had noticed, the refined mannerisms, the careful speech, the grace in her movements, suddenly made sense. This was no ordinary wanderer. She had hidden herself beneath the cloak and veil, choosing to travel in disguise for reasons he could only guess. I didn't expect," the cowboy began, struggling to find words. The woman's voice was calm, even as she met his astonished gaze. "I did not come here to deceive you," she said softly. "I have reasons for traveling as I did. It was necessary for my safety, and I had to see who would offer kindness without knowing who I am. I wanted to know if there is still goodness in the world, even in places far from wealth and comfort." The cowboy's mind raced. All the small clues he had noticed, the elegance, the intelligence, the careful manners, were now clear. She had chosen to hide her identity to protect herself, and perhaps to understand human nature more fully. Her words carried weight and sincerity, and he realized that she had taken a great risk by revealing even this much. Why travel like this?" he asked slowly, trying to process the revelation. "Why not stay where you are safe with people who know who you are?" She looked out at the plains, her eyes distant as if recalling memories. "Because safety is not the only thing I seek," she said quietly. "I wanted to know the truth of people, the truth of kindness without expectation. I wanted to see if someone could offer help and shelter without knowing my name, my status, or my wealth. You did that. You offered me safety, food, and respect without any thought of gain. That is why I revealed myself now. You deserve to know who I am, even if it shocks you." The cowboy's mind was still reeling. He had met many travelers in his time, some honest, some deceitful, but none like this. Here was a woman of privilege, courage, and wisdom, who had chosen to travel alone through harsh lands just to see the world as it truly was. He felt a mix of admiration, disbelief, and respect. He handed the bracelet back to her, still amazed. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I never expected, not like this. You could have been anyone, and yet," he paused, searching for the right words. "And yet you are extraordinary." The woman gave a faint smile, one that was both shy and confident. "Thank you," she said. "Extraordinary is not what I seek. Understanding, honesty, and kindness, that is what matters to me, and you have shown me all three." The cowboy felt a shift in his perspective. He had always respected courage and strength, but now he saw a different kind of bravery. The courage to reveal one's true self, the strength to travel alone, and the quiet dignity to act with integrity despite hardship. He realized that this encounter had changed him, opening his eyes to the depth of human character and the importance of compassion. As they returned to the cabin, the cowboy and the woman walked side by side, both quiet in thought. The revelation had created a new understanding between them, a bond formed through trust, kindness, and shared respect. For the cowboy, the plains no longer seemed as empty or lonely. For the woman, the kindness she had found in a stranger reaffirmed her belief in the goodness of people, even far from wealth and comfort. Inside the cabin, the cowboy offered her a place by the fire, and she accepted. The atmosphere was different now, less cautious, more open. They spoke quietly, sharing stories of their pasts in measured words. She told him fragments of her life, her family, her upbringing, and the reasons she had chosen to travel in disguise, while he shared stories of his years on the plains, of survival, solitude, and simple joys. Each story built a bridge between them, a deeper understanding that transcended appearances, status, or circumstance. By the evening, the fire crackled warmly, and the cowboy could see the calm satisfaction on her face. She no longer seemed like a weary traveler, but a person who had found a rare measure of safety and trust. And he, in turn, felt a profound respect and admiration for her courage, wisdom, and humility. For the first time since their meeting, they laughed together, a quiet, genuine laugh that filled the small cabin and echoed into the plains. It was a sound of relief, of recognition, and of human connection. The cowboy had seen many things in his life, but nothing like this. The veiled woman, now revealed, was a living testament to bravery, wisdom, and the strength of the human spirit. As the night settled over the plains, the cowboy sat near the fire, thinking about the day and the revelation. He realized that life was full of surprises, and that true character often lay hidden beneath appearances. The woman's presence had changed him, and he knew their encounter would remain in his heart forever. And as the wind whispered softly outside, the cowboy understood that this moment, the revelation of her identity, the trust between them, and the shared kindness, was not just an end but a beginning. Their journey together, now filled with understanding and respect, promised more stories, more lessons, and more moments that would shape both of their lives in ways they had never imagined. The next morning dawned with a gentle light spilling over the plains, turning the tall grasses into a sea of gold. The air was fresh and crisp, carrying with it the quiet sounds of birds beginning their daily songs. The cowboy rose early, as was his habit, but today he moved differently, slower, with a thoughtful calm in his steps. The events of the previous day, the revelation of the woman's true identity, and the quiet bond forming between them lingered in his mind, leaving him with a mixture of awe, respect, and curiosity. Inside the cabin, the woman was awake as well. Her veil was still in place, but she seemed more at ease, her posture relaxed, her hands gently resting on the small bundle she had carried all this time. The cowboy prepared a modest breakfast, laying out bread, cheese, and fresh water, and placed it on the table. She accepted it with a polite nod, and for a while they ate in quiet companionship. The silence between them was comfortable, filled not with awkwardness but with a shared understanding that had grown over the past days. Once breakfast was done, the cowboy suggested they take another walk, this time further than before, toward the hills in the distance. "It's a good day to see the land from above," he said. "You'll get a view of the plains you can't see from down here." She agreed, and together they set off, moving carefully but steadily across the soft, rolling terrain. As they walked, the woman spoke quietly, her words thoughtful and deliberate. "I have traveled far, seen many places, and met many people," she said. "But few have shown me the kind of honesty and kindness you have. Most see only the veil, the bundle, and make assumptions. You did not. You offered help without question, without judgment. That is rare." The cowboy listened, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt in years. "I only did what I thought was right," he said simply. "It's not always easy to help strangers, but sometimes you have to. Life out here teaches you that small acts of kindness matter more than anything else." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful as they scanned the horizon. "And yet, your kindness has changed more than my day. It has changed the way I see the world. For a long time I have hidden behind this veil, afraid to trust anyone. But now I see that there are people like you who act without expectation, who offer safety and respect simply because it is the right thing to do. That gives me hope." The cowboy felt humbled. He had lived a life of solitude, expecting little from others. Yet the woman's words reminded him that even simple actions could carry great meaning. He realized that the bond forming between them was not based on status, wealth, or appearances, but on trust, respect, and shared humanity. As they climbed a gentle rise, the plains stretched endlessly below them, a tapestry of gold grasses, winding creeks, and scattered trees. The woman paused to take in the view, her veil fluttering slightly in the breeze. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "So vast, so free. I can see now why you love it here. There is a kind of peace in this place that I have never known before." The cowboy smiled quietly. "It grows on you," he said. "When you spend enough time here, you begin to understand its rhythm, its quiet lessons. The plains teach patience, resilience, and respect for life in all its forms." For a long while they stood together in silence, taking in the view. The woman's presence had brought a sense of calm and reflection that the cowboy had not anticipated. He realized that meeting her, sheltering her, and sharing his home had changed him as much as it had changed her. There was a new depth to his understanding of kindness, trust, and the power of human connection. Eventually they began the walk back to the cabin, their steps slower, measured, and comfortable. Once inside, the cowboy tended to the fire while the woman carefully unpacked her small bundle. From it, she retrieved a journal and a few personal items, handling them with care. The cowboy watched her, noticing the contrast between her delicate handling of her possessions and the ruggedness of his own daily life. It was a reminder that appearances could be deceiving, and that true character often lay hidden beneath layers of circumstance and experience. As evening approached, the woman turned to him, her eyes bright with quiet emotion. "I am grateful," she said softly, "for your kindness, your trust, and your patience. You have shown me that true generosity exists, even in a world that can be harsh and unforgiving. I will not forget this, nor will I forget you." The cowboy felt a lump in his throat. Words were not easy for him, but he found the right ones at last. "And I will not forget you," he said. "You've reminded me that even in solitude we can connect with others. You've shown me courage, wisdom, and humility, and I respect you more than I can say." The woman smiled faintly, lifting her veil slightly to reveal her serene face in the soft glow of the firelight. For the first time, the cowboy saw her fully, not just as the veiled traveler he had sheltered, but as a person of strength, grace, and insight. The sight left him in quiet awe, and he realized that the connection they had formed was rare and precious. Night fell over the plains, and the fire crackled warmly in the cabin. They sat together, not needing words, simply sharing the quiet comfort of each other's presence. The cowboy thought about the journey that had brought her to his door, about the courage it took to travel alone, and about the trust she had placed in him. He also thought about himself, about the quiet lessons of the plains, and about how this unexpected encounter had shifted his understanding of kindness, bravery, and the human heart. The woman finally spoke again, her voice calm and thoughtful. "Tomorrow, I must continue my journey," she said. "But I will carry what I have learned here with me. You have given me something far more valuable than shelter. You have given me hope, and the reminder that not all people are bound by greed or fear. Some are guided by integrity and compassion, and that makes all the difference." The cowboy nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and pride. "And you've reminded me of something important too," he said, "that courage and kindness are stronger than appearances. That the heart matters more than wealth, and that trust, once earned, can be life-changing." They spent the rest of the evening in quiet reflection, watching the flames dance and listening to the soft sounds of the plains at night. The bond they had formed was strong, built on trust, shared experiences, and a mutual understanding that transcended words. Both knew that the time together was limited, yet the lessons, the emotions, and the memories would stay with them forever. As she prepared to leave the next morning, the cowboy helped her mount her horse. She adjusted her veil, and for a brief moment their eyes met fully, unguarded and sincere. "Thank you," she said again, her voice carrying both gratitude and warmth. "For everything. For showing me that kindness is real, and that trust is possible even in a world that often seems harsh." The cowboy nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "Take care of yourself," he said, "and remember what you've learned here. The world may be big and unpredictable, but there are always people willing to do what's right if you give them the chance." She smiled faintly, then turned her horse toward the horizon. The plains stretched endlessly before her, the morning sun glinting on the tall grasses. With a final glance back at the cabin, she rode off, leaving the cowboy standing alone on the small rise, watching her disappear into the vast landscape. For a long time he remained there, reflecting on the past days. The encounter had changed him profoundly. It had reminded him of the importance of trust, kindness, and humility. It had shown him that appearances could be deceiving, that courage could take many forms, and that even the simplest acts of generosity could create lasting impact. And though she was gone, the memory of her presence, her words, and her grace remained with him. He knew that life on the plains would continue as it always had, quiet, challenging, and solitary. But now there was a new warmth in his heart. He had learned that even in solitude, connection and understanding were possible. That sometimes the smallest gestures could have the deepest meaning, and that kindness, trust, and respect could bridge worlds that seemed far apart. The cowboy turned back toward his cabin, the wind rustling softly through the grasses. He knew that this story, the story of the veiled woman, the kindness offered, and the revelation of her true identity, would stay with him forever. And though he would continue his life on the plains, tending to his land and living quietly, he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper appreciation for humanity, and the lasting reminder that true courage and kindness could change lives in ways that wealth, status, or appearances never could. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting light across the vast plains, and the cowboy stood tall, ready to face whatever came next, forever marked by the extraordinary encounter with the woman who had revealed herself to be far more than he had ever imagined.